What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'll break down what's happening with the overall market thus far as we have more economic data coming out, not to mention new developments on the charts. I'm going to break down what I think could end up playing out as the market still is looking kind of weak. But before I break the devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Weeble link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Weeble and deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 free stocks. If you deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 of them. And the offer ends very soon in just about 12 days. Anyways, now when looking at the market, you guys can see that we have this big gap on SPY to fill. I believe that this gap is going to get filled and we have a bit more downside coming. However, it's not the end of the world because very soon SPY is going to base and bounce. It may take a little bit of time to get that bounce, but I still see potential for that bounce. We may dip a little bit more, but we're going to be watching this key support levels and just see how things perpetuate from here. Now, moving forward, I'm going to talk about some data and such before I break down the charts. As a reminder, tomorrow is going to be Friday, April 19th, 2024. In the morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have one Fed speaker. And besides that, that's pretty much it for the main pieces of data. However, we also have a lot of news coming out involving the whole Israel and Iran situation. This is still very, very tense. As you guys know, Israel has threatened to attack Iran back after their retaliatory attacks. And it's been going back and forth and back and forth. Iran is saying that if Israel ends up attacking them, they're going to attack back. So it's just going back and forth. Things are very, very tense, and there's no sign of this de escalating so far. Iran is warning that it may have to revise its nuclear doctrine, threatening to hit Israel nuclear sites. Israel is also threatening to hit Iran back. It's just going back and forth, guys. It's just madness. And I just want to say that even though it's all talk right now, these threats have a lot of serious merits because if Israel ends up attacking Iran back after what happened on over the weekend, and if Iran, ends up attacking Israel back and just goes back and forth, crude is going to surely start going up. Crude futures will start increasing, which is going to drive inflation higher and really affect the Fed's policies. That's going to be very important. So we'll have to wait and see if anything happens, at least for the time being. For other factors involving the markets, we had Netflix just announce its earnings. Going into tomorrow, we have American Express and then P&G, but Netflix is one of the most important ones. Netflix announced their earnings and the share price is down quite a bit because their guidance was not the best, despite the fact that their earnings were pretty good. And let me clarify. So their total memberships rose 16% in the quarter, reaching 270 million. That's well above the 264 million Wall Street had expected. On top of this, this was the last glimpse investors get out of the company's subscriber base going forward. Uh, on top of this, we're going to be looking at other changes. So we saw them once again post pretty good earnings. We had a $5.28 EPS, which is above expectations. Revenue is at 9.37 billion, above expectations. Total memberships is above expectations, not bad whatsoever. And their net income for the first quarter was at 2.33 billion, which is once again above what we saw during the previous period last year. So good growth, good overall earnings so far. But the problem for them was their guidance. You could see right over here, Netflix said that for the second quarter revenue, the forecast is 9.49 billion, just shy of Wall Street's estimated 9.54 billion. And because of that, the share price is down. We saw the share price drop as a result of that. And that is a little bit negative for many different investors out there. So that just goes to show how important guidance is, guys. Netflix, if anything, it's continuing to dip right now. And that's a little bit more negative, at least for more of these investors. I think right now, at the time of recording this, we're down about 4.8%, and the share price is continuing to remain bearish as a result of that. For other factors involving the markets, two more things. We have our overall fear and greed index in the charts below here. Then we also have some options that I'm going to show you. So for the market momentum is continuing to dip as we approach the 125 daily moving average. On top of all of this, we also have the puts and call options approaching extreme fear as we're starting to see more and more puts being bought. The puts are making up the majority of options flow and order flow right now, and we're starting to see a lot of sellers stepping in. The VIX is still on a very, very strong uptrend as we're hitting extreme fear in terms of sentiment. We're well above our daily moving average right now, and that's a bit more bearish for the markets. And things are remaining like this as of right now. The bears are still in control. On top of all of this, I just want to call out that for the options chain, we have quite a few options expiring. We have over 1.2 million calls expiring for tomorrow, right? And we have a little bit over 3 million puts expiring. We have a 2.61 puts to call ratio. I think it should be higher than that. And we have over 500 being max pain. So the majority of positions are actually in puts. Most people are betting that the market's going to be dropping. This doesn't guarantee anything, considering the fact that there is a lot of bearish news that it's still affecting us, and there is a risk of the market dipping a bit more. But looking at 500 being max pain, the market makers could trigger that at least for close. So we watch to see if we get a bounce or not. But here's how I think the market's going to move. So I just wanted to call out that on SPY, the daily chart is still bearish. We have this gap to fill all the way down to 497. I think we're going to fill this gap. And then if you look at like the weekly charts, our 20 EMA is around 495. So I think somewhere in this range, this 495 to 497 range, SPY could be testing that. And then once we test that, we could be looking for a bounce later on. I think that that's going to be a key support. And considering that we're down 5 days in a row, we are due for a small bounce. I think that we're going to come down tomorrow. We might kind of pop in the morning, then drop, fill this gap all the way down at 497, maybe a little bit lower. Then we might see a little rebound either at the end of the day tomorrow, if not by next week. There is potential for that in the charts, in my personal opinion. With the QQQ on the daily charts, it's the same thing essentially. We're still looking bearish right now, very bearish. Could be looking for a move all the way down to about 421.5 to 420, and somewhere in that range, we could be looking for this stock to base before we try to get a little rebound. That is still a possibility. Remember, the rebound is not going to be massive. It could just be a temporary one. For Tesla, we're looking a bit more bearish overall. We're going to be watching 149. If we end up losing that, we could be sinking to fill our gap all the way down here. Tesla has a gap way, way, way back. I think this goes back into last year. There's a gap to fill all the way down into the mid 140s. Excuse me. So we could fill this gap. We could dip a little bit more if Tesla ends up losing 149. So I'll be watching for that on the daily chart. And then for Nvda, daily is kind of indecisive. We're going to be watching to see how this changes. But with that being said, I'm going to go back to SPY and kind of break down more specific levels. I just want to give you guys a glimpse of the daily charts. So looking at our chart right now, SPY is still bearish. It tried to rebound and ended up failing. For tomorrow, look for another attempt to rebound. We could actually test about this 500 to 502 area. And if we lose that and start breaking back down, watch 500 as support. If we lose that, watch 499. If that fails us, we're coming all the way down to this 497 to 495 range. And somewhere around here, we should see some buyers try to defend the stock from here. So I think that's watch resistance at 500, 502. 503 and then 505. I think that SPY may try to pop tomorrow, then drop, fill its gaps down here, and then try to bounce after that. So watch and see a little bit of a move to the downside, a little pop and drop move back down to 497 to 495, then a bounce after that. I find that to be very, very probable. For the QQQ, we have resistance, and we like to test resistance at the 20 EMA. So if we do get a little gap up, a little rebound, we could retest 425, then reject, then dip a little bit lower to 422, if not this 421 to 420 range. And then once we approach this low, we should be looking for a bounce after that. So look for a retest of our 20 EMA, the green line up here at this 425 area, rejection back down, and then a bounce after that. I find that to be very, very probable. So I think that we might get another dip, and then the market may try to rebound after that. For Tesla, we're still looking bearish. We're on a big drop right now, barely holding 149. We'll see if this holds or not, depending on the news. If Tesla loses this, we could easily fall to the mid 140s to fill our gap and then bounce after that. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up happening. If we break past the high of the day today, 152 basically, not the high of the day, but that's actually the high during the market open hours. 152, if that breaks, we could see a little rebound, but my guts tells me it's going to dip a little bit more before we get some kind of bounce. So I'll be watching for that on Tesla stock. For Nvda hit this resistance 2 times. There is a risk of this dipping a little bit more. I could be looking for a retest of about 838, if not 834. And once we approach this support, we'll see if it bounces or not. But I see a little bit of a dip coming before we try to make our move back up. I find that to be very, very probable. For Aapl stock, Aapl is on a bit of a downtrend right now, continuing to make lower highs and lower lows. As of right now, I just want to call out. So let me actually pull up one more thing on Aapl. When you zoom out, I don't think my chart's showing this on the hourly. I have to switch over to a bigger time frame just to show you this. 166 is where, or 165 to 166 is where Aapl bounced the last time we tested it. So if you look at the chart right here, what you'll see is right here, we have this 166 to 165 area. The last time we hit this, Aapl got a nice bounce. So looking back at the hourly time frame right over here, you will see that that is a very, very key level for Aapl, and we could end up testing that. So for Aapl, we have resistance at 167.5 and then 168. We also have support at 166.75, followed by 166. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple dips a little bit more, hits 166 to 165, then bounces off that. That is a strong possibility as the share price is still bearish, and we have this downtrend for the last couple of days that's continuing to persist. So I see a risk of downside on Apple and the overall market, and then we'll see if we get some kind of like break after that or not. Moving forward, for a couple more tickers, so I'm going to start talking about the other tickers I typically talk about, at least for now. Palantir is still bearish. I called out 21 yesterday, and that is where we ended up sinking to. If we fail to hold 21, look for a move all the way down to about 20.8, if not 20.5. Then we could be looking for a bounce after that, but I do see potential for a little bit more downside. Supermicro, of all things, managed to try to pop a bit to 1020. Since then, it's been dipping, and we could be looking at a move all the way down towards our 4-hour 200 EMA at 888. If we end up continuing to sink and we lose 910, this imbalance right here, which is acting as support. If we lose that, look for 888 to 900, this range right here, and then a bounce after that. I find that to be very, very probable. For Rivian, it's trying to test the 20 EMA. We're going to be watching resistance at 9, 8.98 to 9. If we break through that, look for a push for 9.5. If we end up rejecting, we could be coming back down towards about 8.5. Might reject a bit and start sinking to about 8.5, then bounce off that. That's a strong possibility as well. For SoFi, we kind of rejected off our 50 EMA, kind of coming back down. It could pop a bit and then continue to sink a little bit more towards the $7 area. Then we could bounce off that. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're on a bit of a downtrend right now. We came down to our target of 192. But just know that the last time we hit 190, this thing got a big bounce. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of pop again, retest, 194 or so, then start dropping all the way down to 190. And from 190, we could see a bounce after that. So I think that there is a risk of a pop and drop like move, then a bounce after that. So watch for that. For AMD, I called out that this thing could sink to about 154. And then if we ended up losing 154, look for 150. We actually managed to hold support so far. I could see this retest 152, then try to rebound, but I do see a test coming for about 160 very soon. Might dip first and then bounce, but look for 160 later on. I think it's going to bounce soon. Could dip a little bit first to about 152 to 150, and then look for a rebound to 160. I find that to be very probable. For ARM, we're still looking a bit more bearish right now. We called this out yesterday. I was calling out how this could easily drop to 100. If we lose that support, we could be sinking all the way down to this next support at about 91. So look for 100 being our next test. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. If we fail to bounce off that, look for 91 to be coming, followed by 80. Basically, 80 is coming next. So we still look very, very bearish on ARM in my personal opinion, and we'll see how well it holds from there. For a few more, we have Coinbase. Coinbase was trying to rebound and kind of rejected, so it's still kind of indecisive, forming a flag right now. I wouldn't be surprised if this actually dips a little bit more before it tries to rebound. We're still below our 200 EMA, that's why. We could retest this support right here, so if you take a trend line, you could draw this support zone like this. We could be revisiting this area, kind of like pop a bit, then come all the way down to about 214, maybe a little bit lower. We could retest this 212 area and then try to make our way back up to 220 after that, and eventually start popping again. But I do see a little bit of a dip coming before it tries to rebound. For Amazon, Amazon had a pretty weak close. It depends on if we can hold 179 or not. If we lose that, I could see this thing dipping all the way down to about 177.5 to 178. So it may pop a bit, then drop down to 177.5, and we'll see if we bounce or not off that. But be prepared for a little bit more downside on the price. For Meta, we're still on a bit of a downtrend right here on Meta. Meta tried to break out. It came just short of my 515 target, at least from the morning, and we ended up sinking. So now we're approaching our support again at 500. If that fails, let's look for 496. If that fails us, we're going to dip lower. So watch and see if we hold support and try to bounce or not. With that being said, we're still looking a bit more bearish on Meta. We're on a slight downtrend for now. We haven't really broken out yet, so we have to give this a little bit more time. It needs more time to get that break, so I'll be waiting to see how it goes, and that's going to be key for this moving forward. We could even draw out like a trend line like this just to see if we get a break or not. But for now, we're in this channel. We have to see if this channel kind of holds or not. So it could dip a bit before it tries to break. So watch for that. On Microsoft, we're looking a bit more bearish. We're continuing to fall right now. We're looking at our support at 401 and then 400. This 401 to 400 range could be tested. So look for a little bit more downside on Microsoft before we attempt to bounce. So I'm going to be watching to see a little bit more downside for now before we make any bigger moves. That is going to be key, at least for the share price for the time being. For Google, in my opinion, is still kind of weak. It was trying to break out and kind of failed. I was talking about this yesterday. So now we're going to be watching support at 157.27. If we lose this, 156 is coming. And then if it bounces off this, we'll have to see. The 4 hour is showing some life, but it may dip a little bit more before it tries to push even higher. I think Google is going to bounce. I think it's going to bounce later, but it might dip first before we get that break. So watch for that very, very carefully. The VIX is on a bit of an uptrend, still trying to bounce. We could get one more spike in the VIX to retest 19. Maybe the market dips a little bit more, but then eventually I do see the VIX retracing just a little bit as the market might try to bounce. I think the market may bounce later on. So could the market dip a bit more? Yes, it can, but a bounce could come later. I still hold that view. The 10-year Treasury yield is still going up as we had a lot of Fed speakers for today bouncing off 4.5. If it keeps going higher, look for 4.7. If it pushes higher, that would be a little bit more bearish for the markets. That's still going on. The dollar managed to bounce. If it keeps going up, look for this to go up to about 106.25. If that breaks, 106.5 is coming. And if this pushes a little bit higher, this could be bearish for the markets. So we'll just have to wait and see. And then if we retest this resistance, we could reject and the market could bounce later. So that's what I'm still seeing. So my general view of the market is this. There is a risk of more downside on SPY. I still think that this chart could sink more, and we're getting signals that suggest there is a risk of that. I think that SPY could kind of pop and drop or kind of drop again tomorrow. So 495 to 497, that range over there. And then once we approach the mid 490s, if not 497, around that area, I think that this might try to bounce next week. I think there's a chance it's going to happen looking at earnings coming out. And because we are kind of due for that, so it might just be a temporary move. But for now, just be prepared for more downside just to be safe. All right. So with that being said, make sure you guys watch your levels very carefully. The market is very tricky. The market tends to do very, very ironic, tricky things. So you always have to be prepared for that no matter what. I just want to say that, look, guys, I'm not always going to be right about every single projection I have because no one is capable of being right 24/7. I'm sure the majority of you know that. But that's the reason why, as a day trader, you always want to look at levels. You always want to be prepared for what the next level is. And I recommend doing that if you are trying to trade or do anything like that. So you know what the levels are. You'll know if we are about to see more volatility, and you know how to look at different factors. That's going to help us understand how these markets end up moving. Right now, we have a lot of negative factors. We have bonds going up. We have yields affecting the markets. We have the dollar still increasing in value. There's a risk of crude going up, inflation increasing because of the whole war between Iran and Israel. So with all of that going on, the market's in still like a very, very critical position. So you just want to be open-minded to anything and watch and see how things go. I think the market has more potential downside coming first, but then after that, once the market bases, we're going to be looking for a very nice bounce. I don't know if we're ready yet. It could take a little bit longer, but just keep this in the back of your minds, guys. The market has more risks for a downside, but then we could get a bounce soon, a little bit later on, okay? So we'll see how things go. I'll be back tomorrow morning to discuss some data and things like that, to talk about some earnings, and then we'll see what the market does moving forward. With that being said, thank you for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow on the next one. Thank you, and peace out.